All right. Well, welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Mann, for being part of our conference. We're very excited to hear from you, and to hear from OECD is a really an important framing around career readiness that you have from this amazing report from 2021. And as we've talked in preparation for this conversation, we're really an industry-led coalition. And I thought it would be really exciting for industry to hear what some of the implications are from your report. But maybe before that, you could just talk a little bit about what your report is saying about the nature of career readiness, what is quality career advising, things like that, things that are really kind of the bread and butter of our Coalition for Career Development Center to start. And then we can start talking about kind of the employer role and impact they can have.
All right, well, thanks so much, Scott. And thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm sorry I can't do it in person. Sorry I can't do it live. But I think what I can tell you is that, the study which we did last year was really changes the narrative around effective career guidance and what we can expect from it. And it does so because the methodology is very different from anything which is done before. It really is sort of like unprecedented the way that we did this work. What we find is that if we look over across multiple countries, if you look at good quality longitudinal data, or the best quality longitudinal data that's available, which follows young people from their childhood into work, if we look to see if we can find evidence linked to their participation in career guidance activities, their participation in the workforce, their connections with the labour market while they're still in school, and see if we can find evidence of higher wages, lower unemployment, greater job satisfaction, and we put in place all the statistical controls which you need, we find that there is strong evidence in different countries to show that we can draw these relationships, we can draw these connections. And in our work, what we're able to do is we look at the patterns, because these are data sets which aren't all perfect by any means, and they often ask very different questions. So we have to look at the patterns across them. And what we found is that we had a core of 11 predictors of career-related attitudes, experiences, activities which young people do while they're in school, or express while they're in school, with better outcomes later on. And often these could be really quite significant. Wage premiums of 5 to 10% are very, 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 very frequently seen. And what this tells us is that, one is that we can group these indicators, these predictors which were found, into 3 areas. Firstly, it's that young people need to be exploring their futures, potential futures in work. And that's where employers are really important. We had a number of indicators which relate directly to the sort of activities which schools organise, which can be enriched and sometimes only be delivered through employer engagement. And that fits with an understanding that the employer offers something special and different to young people, which schools alone can't provide. So we group these indicators into exploring, also first-hand experiences. We find that volunteering and part-time working connect routinely with better outcomes. And then thirdly, how young people think about their futures themselves. And this is probably one of the most innovative parts of the study, that we looked at the sense of certainty that young people have. Do they have a clarity in terms of their ambitions? This is at age 15, 16 typically. Do they know what they need to do to achieve those ambitions? Can they relate what they're doing in school to their ambitions later on? And we find, using OECD data sets, that the more that they explore, the more first-hand experiences they have at work, of the workplace, that their thinking is more mature. And it talks to an important narrative of young people developing their sense of identity as they go through education, gaining new and useful resources and experiences to allow them to go into the labour market with greater confidence and make their investment in education, while they still have the chance to invest in education, more efficient for them in the future. Scott, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. 2 concepts that I really found exciting in your report. One is capacity to aspire, and the other is I'm framing as meaningful career conversations. And I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that and expand a little bit on that.
Well, the capacity to aspire is a really useful idea. It comes from the sociological literature, and its starting point is that all young people have high ambitions for themselves. And we see that in our PISA data. The OECD has these PISA assessments, which we have 15-year-olds from 80 countries complete, including the United States, every 3 years. And we can see that the young Americans are more ambitious for themselves than any generation in, well, certainly go back to 2000 and probably in history. You know, they expect to be working as managers, they expect to be working as professionals, they expect to complete university degrees. And we see that in lots of other countries as well. And so aspiration itself, a desire for something to change in a better way for an individual, is something which is universal. But what people really vary in is their capacity to aspire. Do they have access to the information which they need? Do they have access to the experience, the social networks, the people who can enable them, the people who can tell them, well, somebody like you would actually be really good at this. You know, have you thought about doing, you know, this course in this place? Well, actually, you know, having a language is really useful. You know, we come and, you know, job shadow for a day, you come an intern for a day. This stuff is invaluable for young people to let them know that their aspirations are well-founded, but also to enable them to progress, you know, kind of towards, you know, their transition and the transition they aspire to. So, you know, we think about the capacity to inspire. It's a really useful way of understanding that, you know, the role of schools in all this is to act as a democratic playing field. You know, everybody should have the same opportunities, the same quality of teaching, the same resources, learning resources. But in an area of career guidance, you see huge amounts of variation, because young people can bring from their family backgrounds huge variation in terms of the resources which give them the capacity to aspire. And schools need to be exploring this, understanding this, and, you know, kind of working in partnership with the economic community to make sure that all young people have, you know, similar opportunities early in life to visualize and plan their futures. And the idea about a meaningful sort of conversation, one of the most interesting things which we found is that in a number of these longitudinal studies, they ask young people, have you had a conversation with maybe a parent or a friend or a teacher or a career advisor about a job you're interested in the future? And we find that, you know, routinely, if somebody just says yes to that, they did at 15, they spoke to somebody, they said I spoke to somebody, we find a connection with a better outcome later on. Now, within that conversation itself, it could be that they, you know, that they gained access to, you know, that one piece of information which really made a difference. But what probably it tells us more is that, you know, that's probably not that likely, but it's possible. What it probably tells us more is that, you know, those young people are within a culture of curiosity. You know, they're open, they're talking. It's a social process they're engaging in. They're thinking and reflecting about where they are, who they want to be, how they might get there. You know, their ideas that might change a dozen times, and that's fine. But what you want them to be doing is actually sort of talking to people and thinking and investigating and talking to multiple people about what they're doing, how they do it, whether it might be right for them, how they might get into it. And so what's meaningful in all of this is that, one is that it is couched in a spirit of curiosity and exploration. You know, that it's not simply a yes/no answer. You know, we're trying to, you know, good conversations, you know, will challenge back to the student to ask them about, you know, where their aspirations are coming from, where their thinking is coming from, and it will be done in an awareness that different people have access to different information. And that's why employer engagement is so important, because to young people it feels and, you know, typically is authentic. You know, it provides something new and different to what they can get from within the family or within the classroom. And that's really valuable to young people in building an informed knowledge based upon, you know, a real understanding of the world as it is, as they can sort of like position themselves to go through these very difficult transitions and making multiple decisions about, not just about where you study and what you study, but how hard you study. And so, you know, we kind of need to, you know, develop this culture of curiosity, and conversations are a great sign that that's happening.
Yeah, and it seems like what you're describing, which I wanted just to kind of highlight, you're really talking about career navigation skill building. It's not about helping the student make a right choice. It's about helping them understand the pathways, the opportunities, and how one can pursue those. And I wasn't sure if you had other data on that around what the core set of what career readiness skills looks like when they're graduating.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the frustrations which we have in looking at this data from these 10 different countries, multiple sort of like data sets, is that they often ask sort of different questions of young people. And so if we start looking at participation in multiple career guidance activities, our data sets sometimes can get too small to allow us to do any proper analysis on it. And so in our work, what we did was that we looked at individual comparable aspects of children's lives. And when we look at kind of exploring the future, and we have about 5 elements which fit into that. This is where we've got hard data that participation in these sorts of activities is likely or can be expected to improve outcomes later on for young people. We see something which is similar to what you're talking about in terms of a program of career navigation. We find that job fairs are effective. We find that guest speakers are effective. We find that workplace visits or job shadowing. We find that programs where young people look to develop their application interview skills are effective. And often we think there is again, it's not so much necessarily what happens in terms of the new knowledge which they gain, but it's the process which is really prompting them to reflect upon, these are the educational choices they're making. This is the future I'm imagining for themselves. How well do the two sort of interact? And so we're not really at the point where we can say this is the program, but what we can say is that certainly exploration should begin at a young age, certainly by middle school. By elementary school, we would argue that young people should be being exposed to the breadth of the labour market, the aspirations of young people at a young age, and even at 15, 16 are very narrow. Half of young Americans say they're going to be working one of just 10 jobs by the age of 30. So, broadening that understanding, seeing the connection between what they do in the classroom and who they might imagine themselves becoming in the workplace. Young people really want to know, what use is it going to be? How is it going to help me? But all this sort of like fits into, kind of effectively a real program of exploration, and then introduction towards potential futures. And so, alongside the exploration, the direct first-hand experiences of workplaces are really important. And that could be through job shadowing, could be through work placement, but part-time work is really important. And young people get an awful lot from that. And many schools, don't encourage it. And if they do encourage it or allow it, they don't always make best use of their, what young people learn within the workplace. Volunteering is very effective. And that's a very good way of getting young people into workplaces where it might be hard for them to find a part-time job. And what we can see across this is that, the more experience they have, the more they explore, the more mature their thinking is. And that's what we think is really driving this. It's the clarity of thinking in terms of being able to visualize and plan a future. And the pressure is high now. Particularly in this post-pandemic. We're in the post-pandemic world at the moment, but the world which is heavily influenced, the pandemic labour market. An awful lot of young people going into education. They need to make multiple decisions, more decisions than ever before. And they need to be able to navigate that. And this is a discipline just as important as being able to do algebra or know your grammar.
It's fantastic. And I want to this is really great and really appreciate the level of detail around the ways in which our industry partners can help connect with schools to really support youth development and helping them come up with more certainty and understanding to be able to navigate. You've mentioned a few times the word outcomes. And I think one of the things that makes your work really unique is when you're talking about outcomes, you're not talking about better grades, you're not talking about attendance. You're talking about young adult, down the road in their future. And I thought maybe you could expand on really the return on investment that I think our states could look at, as well as businesses invest in, because there's something important that they're going to gain out of that.
Yeah. Well, before I worked for the OECD, Scott, I worked in government, and I kind of know that if you want a minister or a secretary of state, to act, you need to give them some hard numbers. And so I've always been interested in how much we can quantify the change. And if we imagine the change is positive, we should be able to find evidence of it somewhere. And so what we did in this data is that we took these longitudinal data sets, which already existed, I say in multiple countries, including the US, but also in Canada, the UK, Germany, a range of countries. And typically in these studies, what we've got is data for 15, which is very useful for us because we run PISA, and so we know, what's happening typically to 15-year-olds in lots of countries. So we look at what happened to them by the age of 15, and then we look 10 years later, age 25. Can we see evidence of lower rates of, we use the acronym NEAT, not being in education, employment, or training, so unemployed effectively. Do they have high rates of unemployment? Do they have what the rate of what their earnings are? And earnings is really useful because that's quite a, that's probably the most subtle indicator which we've got. As is an employer willing to give a young person more money than you'd expect for somebody with that qualification, from that social background in that part of the country that happens to have done these career development activities or have this experience while they're at school, are they paying them more? And we find very strong evidence that there's a very strong pattern of relationships there. As I say, typically we're looking at wage premiums of 5 to 10%. I'd argue that what we're seeing here is young people who are better fits for jobs. They're probably staying longer. They're probably being more productive, earlier, because they've self-selected better themselves. They've done their exploration. They've and that exploration may have started with a jobs fair when they're 13 or 14. But you'd hope that they've had opportunity to experience a workplace like that to make sure that they are the right fit, that they are positioning themselves within an economic sector to really connect with their interests and what really interests and excite them about their futures. And so from an employer's point of view, we kind of, we haven't worked out the full return on investment. It could be done. I'd need to get hold of a couple of economists to make that happen. I haven't got the budget for it, but we could do, and the data is all there, for somebody to do. But I'd say about employers, the thing for employers is that sometimes there is a temptation, to tell the happy story, the glossy story, the marketing story, the corporate social responsibility story of what a sector is. And the return to the employer here really is, giving a warts and all, authentic vision of what it's really like. You want to attract people who, if it's nursing, understand what it's like to change a bedpan. If it's in another industry, there will be stuff that some people find tough, some people won't mind at all. And you need to make sure that young people really understand that. So authenticity is a really key point. And engaging sort of frequently, from a young age, really helps young people to develop this understanding of the labor market.
Yeah, well, I think it's, now let me know if this is a fair kind of summary of the outcomes, right? That when youth are getting access to these career conversations, these meaningful conversations, when they're getting access to the information, access to really kind of that self-discovery, they're increasing their future wage earnings. So they're navigating into higher paying jobs. Whatever the cause is, something's happening that these individuals are receiving higher wages. And what you call them NEAT youth, which is the kind of international language for what we call in the United States opportunity youth or disconnected youth. And so definitely we have a problem in our condition of career readiness report. We only got 5 states that are keeping that 20 to 24-year-old population, keeping 90% or more of them employed or in education or training as a key element. So we know we've got some significant issues in that population. And so seeing the connection between providing quality career development activities and really focusing on career readiness, that's what I mean in terms of the return in that way, is that we know it's going to have a better chance of keeping them connected, but also higher wage earnings down the road, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's right. And I would say what we found evidence was of, ultimately we confirmed 11 indicators or predictors of young people's experiences at age 15 with better employment outcomes, 10 years later. And, there's a really good summary of the report, which which lists what these indicators are. And I should say that, these aren't exhaustive. There may be other things as well, but we've got data for these. We've got hard data from different countries in a way that we didn't have before. And so, and what we did as well is that we exhaustively looked at the research literature, the existing research literature in this field, and we integrated our findings into the research literature. So we've really have the largest, most comprehensive study in the world which has been done, which looks at are there things which young people can do, are there attitudes we'd expect them to have, which aren't about which are about the clarity of their vision for their future and how they relate that to their education. Are there things which about them which really do make a difference? And it is sort of like lower unemployment rates, it is higher wages, and importantly, there's a third area as well where we collect data, which is around job satisfaction or career satisfaction. And that's really important because, for young people now, this generation is more ambitious than ever before, more highly qualified than ever before. And many of them do, kind of finish their education and struggle to find, fulfilling employment. And, we find psychological costs, linked to that. And, nobody wants that. Everybody wants, what we want is, a workforce which is happy to be in the right place, which is showing that they deserve to be paid more, which is showing that they deserve to be, to find that job. And there's a lot in it for employers.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I want to summarize what we've talked about so far within the 5 career readiness pillars that our Coalition for Career Development Centers laid out. And there's 4 of them that I think we've hit on directly. And then I want to bring in technology next, and maybe we can shift over to your ideas around that. I know you've got some really exciting new frontiers of thought around that really align well with our coalition as well. So we're using personalized career plan, or career and academic plan, PCAP, as kind of a way of organizing the career development process. And those 11 indicators you have align perfectly right into that PCAP process. It's really exciting. As you said, this is now really strong evidence that when you're designing these personalized career and academic plan strategies, activities, lessons, it's going to have a payoff in their future adulthood. That's really exciting news. The other is our second pillar is career advising. And I think one of the things that I find interesting is I think we have to expand. Career advising isn't just a career counselor. It's who we're getting connected with. You've got parents, you have the educator. I mean, you're actually showing that when the educators engage in these meaningful conversations, which we want our educators facilitating these personalized career and academic plan pieces, because no single school counselor can have the relational dynamic that we need to have with youth. And then the employers become the next, this is all career advising work, and we need to expand that understanding. The third pillar is work-based learning. And this is exactly, you just nailed it on the head. Here's the kinds of work-based learning that has a tremendous impact in terms of future wage earnings and in future employability, which is fantastic. I think one of the challenges we found in our report is that we need to do a better job as a nation to help states identify a policy or strategy, funding streams, incentives, so we can help business, schools, higher ed, and basically at the community level, really integrate and connect better around work-based learning. So we've got some work to do around those pieces, but the fact that there's a payoff at the end, if we can do this, there's a tremendous outcome we can go is fantastic. The other one is accountability. And this is what I love about seeing wage earnings and employment. You're really hitting on key elements of accountability that we need to be working on. And it is about youth ready to enter their future. And so how they get there, the pathways to go, we've got multiple. We're really wanting to expand our idea of post-school outcomes to including military service, to including going directly into employment, as well as post-secondary education. So there's a wider range of understanding that youth are getting to their future in so many different ways, and we want to support that, right? But the fifth pillar is technology, and technology really seems particularly critical to this process because there's no single person. As you said, at the elementary level, we got to get them out of the 10 careers they can talk about. We need to expand, and we need those middle schoolers to have a better understanding and start looking at the details. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see the value of technology and really what we should be doing, both as you're talking to us in the United States, but I'm sure it's an international issue, especially within the EU and other countries that OECD is working with. What is it that we need to be thinking about in the future of technology around this space?
And that was a good summary. And I think what we've discovered here is not really anything which is fundamentally new. A lot of it we knew already, or we suspected already. But what we've got now is some really hard evidence and international evidence, which suggests that there is something which is kind of universal about young people and their transitions, and it fits with a model of change which is very intuitive, and it fits within a wider research literature, and the urgent need really is to make it happen now, because we know from our PISA data that in very many countries, relatively few, less than half of young people by the age of 15 have done some of these activities, and particularly lower achievers, more disadvantaged students. And we have a lot of concern about them, and the extent to which they're being well prepared to really understand the labour market and visualise and plan their way into it. But on digital technologies, I mean, that is something which we've seen a huge amount of development over the last 2 years. around the world, education systems were looked to digital technologies to deliver career guidance, when people couldn't get together. We've also found a lot of very exciting ways in which digital technologies can really make guidance better. And what I'm really interested in is not simply, can you do the same thing in a different way? Is that can we use it to make the guidance which we give more effective, more efficient, and more equitable? And we can see the way that, that it does fit each of those three. Kind of by effective, we're looking at is the right person getting the right intervention with the right resource, which could be an employer at the right time. Efficiency is all about cost, but it is not just it's cheaper to do an online careers fair maybe than have one in place. But what we can do using the digital technologies is to make sure that when they do see the career guidance counsellor, that guidance counsellor's got really rich information about what the young person has done, what they've reflected on, how their ambitions have changed over time, what the constraints they feel about themselves. Countries are developing portfolios where students can, from a young age, can build up a profile. And so when they see the guidance counsellor can look at them individually, but also look collectively, across the whole cohort. And I know a great example where a school in the UK, found that very high proportion of the students all said they were going to be going to hairdressing. And so, they found this through, kind of like, by gathering information online about the students' interests. They then used the online resources to look at the skills and competencies which go into hairdressing, looked at connected careers. They arranged an online career fair where they brought people in from those other professions. And, then they found that, young people were diversifying their interests. And, it's kind of a simple model, but, that's much, much easier to do now, much cheaper to do now than it was before. And equity is a really big part of this as well.
Let me pause just to kind of summarize that key piece. We're calling it transferable skills. And so what you're saying is when they had a particular area, which hairdressing is on a lower end economically, by focusing on the skills, which we can do within technology, we can then connect them to the transferable skills that are involved in that hairdressing profession, and then connect them to other higher wage opportunities. And then they brought in a career fair designed to help them access and see about those. And then all of a sudden, the capacity to aspire improved, right? And it all goes fantastic. So, and I do want you to hit on equity, because one of the things that we didn't touch on, you mentioned briefly, but didn't hit the final pieces. All of this work we're talking about has a higher impact for lower income youth and youth of different diverse groups and youth with disabilities. That this is where the largest impact you saw in your report when it came to higher wage earnings as well as future employment. So really important that we're investing in our high need school systems as we think about our high need communities. So anyway, but continue on, please.
Equity is a key issue, and certainly our data tells us that young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds, often lower achievers, signal to us through the data that they're not being more prepared, and that they've got a very poorly informed understanding of the labour market and how their education might relate to their ambitions. And that's particularly for the lower achievers, who we probably know are going to leave formal education quite soon. This is their chance. This is their chance to really, sort of get their investment right, to gear themselves up well, to prepare themselves. It's really important. And, they're the ones we're most worried about. Now, so online technologies can be really, really helpful in all of this. Certainly, there's a lot of issues around equity and place. So rural issues. There's big issues as well about how we can get a diverse range of speakers into an individual school. There are all sorts of interesting models which we can to democratize access to really important resources. We've seen it in internships in an older level about how people don't get paid to do them, how only certain types of young people can take advantage of those opportunities, but how important they are in being able to give a later employer confidence that you understand the industry and you're aware of the culture and you can present yourself as somebody from that. And so we're really interested in gathering together international examples of how digital technologies are being used, whether it's like chatbots in India, whether it's virtual work experience placements, which we see in Finland and the UK and Australia, and I'm seeing some in the US as well. to, we're at a point now where the digital technologies haven't been properly evaluated, and it'll be a long time before they're properly evaluated. And they're changing all the time as well. We've got virtual reality coming in, we've got artificial intelligence, we've got machine learning. And at this point, we've got a number of studies which, will bring together sort of case studies, but inevitably, they get old the minute they get published because it's such a dynamic field. And we're planning to create an observatory where people in different countries can share their experiences and tell us how the provision is making guidance more effective, more efficient, more equitable. With a statement from a school principal to show this is something which we think is really valuable. Ultimately, to make young schools and education systems more informed consumers of this new technology, which is happening very rapidly and offers a lot of promise. But there's a risk that we put too much reliance on it, and we kind of see this as a replacement for face-to-face provision. I'm a great advocate of blended approaches. I think something really special happens when people interact in person. It's social, it's social capital, it's wired into our DNA. That, looking across the room with you, I can tell if you're spinning me a line, or if you're giving me something I can really believe. And I think, we need to make sure we don't lose that, that immediacy of what it feels like for the first time to get, put your suit on and go into a workplace, at 16 or 17, for a week or, for a day. The nerves you get, overcoming those, the familiarization, the ability to meet somebody who you wouldn't mind actually asking for a reference, a year or two later, who develop those personal relationships, which you can't always get in the same way, kind of through our online relationships. So we're very interested in doing that. We're very interested in working still on inequalities and guidance, and how guidance can help young people prepare for green jobs. That's something else which is on our agenda at the moment. Right. In Europe in particular, huge agenda around green skills, and a lot of anxiety that we won't have them in place to meet the challenges which are ahead of us.
Yeah, a lot. And I think we'll probably let's kind of end here, but just wanted to also say that our Coalition for Career Development Centers has a strong technology committee, and we're going to be looking forward to working with you on creating and supporting
That'd be great.
Learning as you bring all this together. But we also need to have it is about building consumer understanding of these different supports. And I totally echo, they can't replace the career development process, but they can supplement and support. And so we have to be really strategic in how we use that. So, well, thank you. This has been a fabulous conversation. And I just want to thank you for taking the time, and looking forward to working with you closely and keeping our center connected with the work you're doing down the road. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. Hope the rest of the meeting goes well.